appreciate you being here. This is our first-time event for us, presented by Safe and Sound Schools and Boston University Police, From Tragedy to a Safer Tomorrow. I'm Michele, co-founder and executive director of Safe and Sound Schools. I'm a former elementary school teacher from the Maryland and Virginia public schools. And I'm a mom to 3 beautiful daughters, one of whom, my Josephine, I lost on December 14th, 2012 at Sandy Hook School in Connecticut. Shortly after the tragedy, my family moved here to Massachusetts as we had planned and began a new chapter in our lives, but one for me that would become really important in terms of honoring my daughter with something positive. And for me, that has been working and advocating for the safety of our schools. I know better than most how vulnerable the safety of our children and our adult children and teachers are in schools across the country. Like my daughter's school, many schools and campuses nationwide are feverishly trying to keep up with an ever-changing landscape of threats to the safety and well-being of our school communities. I also know that there are many, many dedicated people working with incredible passion and urgency to better prepare our schools and our school communities for safety. In fact, tonight, we have a room full of leaders in the form of students, parents, educators, administrators, law enforcement, mental health and medical professionals, emergency responders, public health and safety professionals, and community members that span the pre-K through 12 through university communities. Some of you are looking around thinking, leader? Did she just say leader? Me? I'm just a student, a parent, a concerned community member, or I already have a daytime job. But if you're here tonight, you are a leader. All it takes is someone who cares, someone who shows up, someone who joins the conversation. And that's what we're here to do tonight. We're here to engage in conversation, ask questions, and share perspectives on an issue of increasing importance today: the safety of our schools. Whether preschool, elementary, middle, high, or higher ed, our schools serve as the heart of our communities. They are our sacred spaces, places where we hope to nurture growth and learning to last a lifetime. The kind of growth and learning that leads to independent, safe, and meaningful lives. The kind that develops our young people into citizens who build the future. You see, safe schools mean safe students, and safe students go on to save lives and save futures. It's an investment, a long-term one, but one with value that is immeasurable. We all realize that we don't live in a perfectly safe world, but I believe each one of you is here tonight because you realize that a world that is safer is possible. We titled our event From Tragedy to a Safer Tomorrow because as we began gathering experts and building a vision for this event, we realized that each of our panelists brings with them stories and experiences from school communities K-12 through higher ed that have led them to serving the safety of others, led them to work for a safer tomorrow. It's from these experiences that each of us has learned valuable lessons that if left unshared will go unused and forgotten until history repeats itself again. So tonight, I invite you all to sit with us in conversation and then discussion about the safety of our schools and school communities, our students, and our futures. We have an amazing moderator here with us tonight and a panel of people that I'll tell you about in just a few minutes. But before I do so, I'd like to really thank several folks for making this event possible. First, Boston University for hosting us all here tonight. I know we have a lot of BU students, faculty and alums, and volunteers present here this evening and behind this event, so thank you. The BU Police Department and Scott Pare for getting behind this idea with such excitement, support, and resources. When I first met Scott a few years ago, he immediately got what we were trying to do with Safe and Sound Schools, and he offered support and help with anything that we needed. So be warned, all of you, that we take people up on their offers. Several of you already know that. We couldn't ask for a better partner in this work and for this event here than BUPD. The BU PR lab teams for Safe and Sound and Boston University Police Department of this semester and the past few. These teams hatched the idea for this event, helped in the planning, put out the word, and are working around the room and behind the scenes as I speak. The Safe and Sound staff, of whom I'd like to call out especially Amy Chandler, also known as Professor Chandler, and Martha Corona Gonzalez and Ermi Jean Simon, 2 BU grad students that we scooped up after graduation last year. Make another note, several of you. These ladies have been here at the very center of this event from the get-go. I'd also like to thank our sponsors whose financial contributions have provided for this event, and most importantly, the cookies and brownies that are out there from BU Catering. Thank you to BU Catering. And I hope all of you had a chance to circulate out there with our sponsors and get to know them. We have Axis Communications out there. They're headquartered here in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Axis Communications is the worldwide leader in IP-based camera and security solutions and is committed to helping build safe and secure learning environments. We also have Brandon CopSync here as well. They provide the nation's only real-time threat alert and notification system which links a school building under threat directly to law enforcement in 15 seconds or less. We have Share 911 that came all the way from New Jersey to here to share with us their product that empowers every teacher or administrator to initiate a lockdown from wherever they are, simultaneously alerting staff, administrators, 911 centers, and law enforcement directly on their own mobile devices, reducing the time it takes for help to arrive in an emergency. And we have eLerts, another Massachusetts-based group that makes a smartphone communication system to share situation awareness with school staff and police when an emergency is occurring. Thank you all for being here. Another safety technology innovator that's here tonight is LiveSafe. You can learn more about their emergency communications and solutions online as well. We're grateful for our sponsors for making this event possible, but also for their dedication to innovating and developing cutting-edge tools and tech to really enhance what we're all trying to do here for Safer Schools. Lastly, I would like to recognize some special guests that are here with us tonight. We have Sergeant Rich Garin of the Massachusetts State Police here, representing the Governor's Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. We have Peter Fiedler, the Vice President of Administrative Services here at BU. We have Chip Yeaton, President of the Massachusetts Juvenile Police Officers Association, and many friends of ours from MJPOA. Thank you guys for always having our backs. We've got Tom Robbins, Chief and Executive Director of Public Safety here at BU and with BUPD. We have Chief Dan O'Leary of Brookline and numerous other school resource officers, police, fire, emergency responders, mental health professionals, and community members here in attendance. Your participation in tonight's event exemplifies our mission here at Safe and Sound of bringing all stakeholders and perspectives together for safer schools. I'd like to thank the Boston University faculty and staff, as well as numerous area higher ed school communities that are here with us tonight. The many K-12 superintendents, educators, and students from our surrounding K-12 communities. And the BU student body government leaders, Andrew Cho, Kanakasuwa, and Messiah Gomes for being here. And finally, I would like to thank the many journalists and media professionals that are here tonight to help us spread the word and get the conversation to the folks at home in our communities tonight. Taking a look at our run of events here, you can see that following my remarks, we're going to move right into our panel discussion and follow that discussion with a Q&A session. We'll have team members circulating around with a mic to get to you and your questions. And alternatively, you guys during that Q&A can tweet and post your questions and comments to us at Safe Schools. You can tweet by using the hashtag #SaferTomorrow. We'll be collecting and monitoring those questions, and we'll be sharing those. Our team, let's see. Having said all of that, I'd like to introduce you to each of our participants this evening and give each of them a few minutes to talk about themselves, their backgrounds, and how they got roped into being here with us tonight. So I'm going to start with Scott Pare. You've heard me talk a little bit about Scott already. He's the Deputy Director of Public Safety here at BU with the BU PD. And Scott, if you would, just give us a little bit of background about your experience professionally and how you ended up to be in this role as a safety leader at BU.
Good question. I started my career with the Mass State Police. I was with the State Police for 27 years. Last time I was at Logan Airport and went there shortly after 9/11. I ended up becoming the troop commander there of the State Police and then the Director of Aviation Security for Massport. And then I had the opportunity after A little different. But I've been here almost 8 years, and I've seen a lot of teamwork, not only throughout the University Police, but throughout the administration in all the area departments, especially Brookline, Boston, Mass State Police, MBTA. We're one of those locations where there's 5 police departments, and if you take one step in any direction, that's where it's jurisdiction. So it can be, as you know, the police that are in the audience can be very interesting. Our department here, since the chief and I have been here, has gone through accreditation, certification not only through the state, but through national accreditation. I think that was a big step in making sure all the policies were where they should be. All our responses and all our practices and standards and everything was top notch. You know, we continue to work with other university departments, but with other educators to try to improve our response and dealing with all threats we have.
Excellent, thank you. I also like to introduce Mo Canady, Executive Director of NASRO, a national leader in school safety training and education and an advisor to Safe and Sound. Mo, if you would just tell us a little bit about how you came to be such an important part of the national discussion on school safety, and as well how you got here tonight.
Well, the first thing you're going to notice about me is I talk kind of funny. And a reporter once described me as a trim man with white hair and a strong Southern accent. I don't know what you do with that, but if you need translation, I'm sorry, I don't have anyone with me, but we'll have to do our best. I was a police officer for 25 years in Hoover, Alabama, just south of Birmingham, largest suburb of Birmingham. Just to put us on the map, in 1994, when Michael Jordan took a break from basketball, that's where he played baseball for that year. So we got to know Michael pretty well that year, and it was a lot of fun. But I had the opportunity, the last 12 years of my career, to work in schools, in school-based policing. And at the time, I was a crime scene investigator, and I'd just gotten promoted, and they wanted a sergeant to take over this unit, and I was the junior man, and I went kicking and screaming. I thought it was the last thing in the world I would want to do. And I can sit here and tell you it was absolutely the best 12 years of my career then or now, working with students and working with parents and educators to come up with creative ways to keep schools safer and to make them safe without them feeling like a prison. I enjoyed that challenge, and I really enjoyed working with students. There was nothing like it. During that time, I became affiliated with the National Association of School Resource Officers, which we just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and became an instructor for them, teaching other officers how to work properly in a school environment. And so in 2011, when I hit retirement eligibility, I really didn't want to leave. I loved my job, and it's great. It's so great to look back and to know I left loving that job. But I had this opportunity to become the executive director for this great organization, and it's been a real honor. And what we do, I'll describe a little more as we go on, but what we do basically is we provide membership services for officers who work in schools, and we train them how to properly work in a school environment. And I'm really proud of the work that we do, and I appreciate the representatives from the State Association here, from MJPOA, and also there are 2 of our national board members who are in attendance as well, and I appreciate them being here. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Kristina Anderson. She's the Executive Director and founder of the Koshka Foundation for Safer Schools and a survivor of the Virginia Tech school shooting. She's also a personal inspiration to me. Kristina.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Kristina. I got into this space, as Michelle kindly mentioned. I'm one of the injured survivors of the Virginia Tech school shooting. So I was 19 years old. If you all remember, you were probably 13, some of you at the time. I was in the French classroom, which was one of the classrooms that he eventually came into a total of 3 times. And I was shot 3 times. I try to hide it well, as much as possible, but
You do.
thank you. We unfortunately, over the course of the shooting, lost 11 of my classmates and my teacher. So I did not go back to Virginia Tech that semester. I came back the following year and went back to college. My job now full-time is as founder and director of the Koshka Foundation for Safe Schools, and Koshka translates to little kitten in Russian. It's a family nickname I've had since I was growing up. But we partner with, we'll talk a little bit later, I'm sure as well, but we partner with law enforcement to look at school safety for 3 ways: prevention, response, and recovery. And so my passion in a big way is how do we talk about school safety with educators, with deans, with campus safety, with students in a way that is not fear-based and more empowering, because really most people won't be directly in the kind of situation that I was, but you may all be very key stakeholders in preventing it. So how do we think about that on a grander scale?
Well said. And rounding out our panel here and representing K-12 school communities, we have the Fitchburg Public Schools Superintendent, Andre Ravenel. Andre is also the president of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Andre.
Thank you, Michele. I want to say I appreciate your honesty in saying that you have a funny accent, because the rest of the world normally tells us that we have a funny accent. It's good to start out that way. I've been in education for over 30 years now, and most of my work has been in urban education. And as a school superintendent, pretty much 24/7, what's on my mind is the health and safety of the 5,500 students that I oversee. During the years, I've seen many things come and go in terms of what are the best ways to approach school safety. And actually now there's a lot of new things that we learned from Virginia Tech that are creating new kinds of ways of looking at school safety. And one component that is really becoming a major concern of myself as a superintendent, but also of all the superintendent associations, is the rise of mental health issues. And those rise of mental health issues in our youngest people, and trying to find the resources to do that. So there are many, many things that impact school safety, from the needs of the building, the needs of the surrounding area, the training of the staff, but really it's also the social emotional issues of the young people that we serve, and then of those people who can impact those young people. So when I got the invitation to join this group, I thought it was a nice mix of all of the different aspects that come together to really bring the best of resources in trying to assure the safest opportunities for our young people.
Wonderful. Okay, and moderating our discussion this evening, we have Meghna Chakrabarti of our own WBUR. And when we were looking for a moderator, our team quickly settled on Meghna. It was like a little too quick, so I was worried we wouldn't be able to get her because we had our hearts set on her. But her professionalism, her coverage of school and community issues here, and her warm voice and presence we felt would be perfect for this discussion this evening. Lucky for us, she was eager to join us and complete this evening's panel. So I'm going to hand it over to her and let her share a little bit about herself while I take a seat, join the panel.
You guys hear me? Everyone can hear me? Okay. So first of all, thank you, Michele, for inviting me to be here tonight. As soon as I got the invitation, I just jumped at the opportunity because it means a lot to me to be bothered as someone who's able to be part of this conversation. Let me just tell you a couple quick things about myself. So I host a radio program at WBUR, and it's Radio Boston. We talk about stuff around New England. You can't hear me up there? Okay, I'll go a little bit louder. What's that? Is that good? Okay. And I am a BU alum as well. I graduated with an MBA from, I guess it wasn't Koshka back then, but it is now, so go Terriers. I'm also a mother of a little boy who's going to turn 1 on Saturday, and a 5-year-old little girl. So, can I just tell a quick story before we get going?
Absolutely.
Okay. So being in the news business, obviously issues of safety and schools, we cover that a lot, we think about it a lot. Roseburg, Oregon being the most recent example. And as a member of the BU community, I get the text alerts that we all get whenever there are issues on campus or surrounding that we need to know about. And by the way, first of all, I did want to say thank you to members of the BU police who are here as well, because you guys have been excellent in helping us out at WBUR anytime we needed any assistance from you, and it means a lot. And also Boston Police and Brookline Police. I'm a Brookline resident, so thank you all, any member of law enforcement, for being here tonight and doing the jobs that you do. But recently, this issue of school safety, I felt most sort of like deeply in my bones. Not that long ago. In fact, last week when I was dropping my daughter off, she's a kindergartner, and anyone who has an elementary school age kid knows that drop-off is always this chaotic time in the morning. There's moms and dads and caregivers and kids and backpacks and scooters and books and crying and lunches, and it's all chaos. So I consider it a huge victory for the day whenever I manage to get my daughter in the classroom by 8:01, even if we're a little bit late. So the other day that happened, and I left the school, and I noticed that the door, the side door that we usually come in and out of, was propped open. Didn't think anything of it. Walked across the school grounds to the other side, and I was about to cross the street, and I looked back over my shoulder. Did I do that?
We're all awake now, though.
Okay. I looked back over my shoulder, and the door was still propped open. The little stone was holding it open. And I noticed it, but again, I didn't think anything of it. I crossed the street, and I stopped. And I thought to myself for a minute, it's now 8:05. Just about everyone who needs to be in school is in school. The playground was kind of empty. And I had this internal debate with myself. Did they mean to prop it open? Maybe there's some teachers who are going to be coming in, or a groundskeeper needed to have access to that part of the building. Or maybe it was just one of us parents propping it open, being nice so that the door didn't have to be open and closed constantly, because all the doors are usually locked. So I stood there across the street staring at the door for a minute or two. And finally I thought, I'm going to go close it. So I crossed the road, go back across the blue playground, and I shoved the rock over and I closed the door. And I emailed the principal, who's a wonderful man, and I said, hey, I noticed this thing. I hope you don't think I'm being paranoid. Just FYI. And he was very gracious about it. He said that should not happen. And he was glad that I told him. And they're going to talk about it with the staff and parents and stuff, and students as well, just to remind people about why we don't do that. So point being that I'm not sure how I felt I had this debate with myself, and I'm not sure I should have had that debate. I should have just gone straight back over and done it. But I'm still coming to terms with the fact that we are living in a world where all of us, as Michele said, all of us need to be thinking about these things. But how do we do it in a way where it's not all we're ever thinking about? How do we create a community where we are safe, we feel safe, and we can thrive together while being, how do I put it, aware of threats but not feeling constantly threatened? I think that that's a good goal for all of us to have, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing from our panel on their experiences and insights to this, because it's part of the world we live in, and we each have an individual responsibility to help get us to that place. So that's my little story about why I'm so delighted to be here today. And I'll just start off by throwing out a question, since I did talk about just locked doors. Can we start with the issue of physical plant? And we have in BU we have a large urban university with, I can't even imagine how many issues you have to think of regarding physical spaces, and everything from that to small rural schools, elementary schools. So I'll just throw it out to anyone who wants to start. Issues of building safety and locked doors, windows, security systems, etc. Where do we begin to think about that?
That's what you did is what we want somebody to
Yes.
do. You have that model of see something, say something. Well, in your case, you
Do
saw something
something.
and you did something, which is even better. we can have the best security in the world at the front doors, but if people leaving the back doors open like you saw, it just makes our system so much weaker. So yes, BU is a big building. We do have some secure places where you have to swipe in, but most of our buildings, quite honestly, you can walk right in, public, anybody.
Open campus.
It's an open campus. What we want our community to be aware of is, much like you saw that, something out of place, something that just wasn't right. People here, they see the same thing over and over every day, but that one incident, that one person out of place, the one object out of place, something that just doesn't seem right, and you can feel it, and it's in your gut. We want you to call. And oftentimes we'll have students, faculty, and staff, I saw it, and I just didn't want to bother you guys with it. Bother us. We want the calls.
I think the interesting thing is that whenever you've got the physical plant and the physical issues, you have the human element. And that's what you saw. There was a human element there. Someone was looking for convenience. As a school superintendent with many schools, I used to find a whole lot more rocks and other objects in the doors than I do now. But it's that repeating it over and over and over again. And it really is, in terms of the question always comes up is, how safe can your building be? And we know, and a lot of the discussion has been about, a lot of the safety that we're able to provide in the facility and through physical structures is really more of a temporary stopgap measure, is to slow things down. Because unfortunately, when someone wishes to hurt someone, they're going to be able to do that. They're going to find a way to do that. But it's really constantly figuring out how far to go to still maintain, kind of an open society and an open community where, people can come and go, the people who own that community. I remember I was a school superintendent after 9/11, and there was a big push to school committees to stop all trips outside of the United States, and all field trips, and all trips to. And I remember I came to my school committee and I said, I understand the fear that you have right now because it feels unsafe. Just tell me, when will it be safe again to start the first trip abroad? And no one was able to answer that question. So it's that balance between keeping safe, being safe, having the appearance of safety and making the things in place, but then also trying to go about our life in a way, that doesn't, cripple the community.
And we refer to that at Safe and Sound as an active awareness, which is something that all of us have. It's an instinct within all of us, and you just articulated that beautifully. I think where for many of us we fall down in that is that we haven't really empowered all of the members of our communities. You felt as though you saw something that you definitely knew was not right, but you felt like, do I have the right to go over there? Am I going to be bothering somebody if I go and I report this? Am I going to look like that pesky parent? So you had this internal debate for a real reason. You haven't been prepared as a parent, and you haven't been recognized and brought in as a member of the team. And I think we in our K-12 school communities really need to focus on that. Really need to bring all of those stakeholders, the custodian, the cafeteria staff, the community members that are coming in and out of our buildings, the parents as well, the students as well. And I know we have a lot of students here with us tonight, to the table, so that they do feel empowered and that they have that active awareness and they feel comfortable developing it. That you don't feel like you have to, squash it, or you don't, feel guilty for speaking up.
You definitely shouldn't feel guilty, absolutely.
Right.
I think you did a great thing because, when I went back to school, I would never sit in the front of the classroom. I'd always sit in the back. I'd look at exits and knowing all that. And I was speaking to a counselor about it, and I was like, oh, I'm very vigilant and very aware. She's like, no, that's fear. And we try to talk ourselves out of that to say it's not the worst case scenario, and usually it won't be, but in a lot of cases, perpetrators of violence, whether they're trying to rob someone or do something more serious, they do their own assessment of the space. And so what you might have seen in that case, which could have just been really someone haphazardly leaving a door open, could have been boundary probing behavior.
Yes.
Someone will want to kind of create a small fire before they set a big fire, and they just want to see what the response will be like. Our perpetrator, again, not to take it to the extreme case of Virginia Tech, which it is extreme, but he chained the doors from the inside. And there's a janitor and there was someone else who had seen those doors and didn't report them. This happened on a Monday. The shooting was on a Monday. The Friday before, we had a bomb threat call into one of our schools, or one of our buildings. again, he probably might have been seeing what that was like. So really, you could be doing everyone a huge favor down the line to say, no, we will stop that behavior off the bat, and why not keep practice that in the same way? Many of you probably don't, but should know about the Clery Act, which is what is the annual kind of reporting of crime. Every time you get notifications because of Clery. So she was raped in her college dorm, and the way he gained access was, correct me if I'm wrong, but a pizza box was under the door, and that's how he walked in. Very preventable kind of small, behavior that had huge implications for a family and a country and campus safety since then. So good job is the short version of that. Because, I mean, and I know you have as well, you travel the country, and we've met so many law enforcement who have said, I'd rather respond to 1,000 red herrings, 1,000, it wasn't this or that, than one Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, Boston, any of those. So we should have more of that than less.
Absolutely.
Well, and if I can add this, school safety is everyone's business. And we tell school resource officers all the time in training that you're not going to go into the school building day one and automatically make the campus a safe place. It takes some team building, so welcome to the team. That was a good move. And one of the things we train them on is the process of building a school safety team and who belongs on that team. And parents certainly should be a part of that. And so we encourage school resource officers, if there's not a school safety team, then take the leadership role in building a school safety team and helping to put one together. That whole prop door business was a pet peeve of mine the entire time I was on SRO. I can't tell you how many bricks and rocks and everything else I kicked out of doors. And when we would have faculty meetings, I'd take the opportunity to encourage everyone else to do that, because there's never a good reason for a door to be propped open on the perimeter of a school building. There's just not. So, I wanted to get people past worrying about, well, am I going to make somebody mad, or is it open for a good reason? It's not. It's not open for a good reason. So, good job.
Thank you. Well, I didn't ask that question to give myself a pat on the back.
Good.
But maybe one of you should have said there was no need to debate for 5 minutes. The crosswalk should have gone back and shut the door.
I think that was a good point, though, because I think I'm a parent, I drop my children off at school, and I continue to have internal debates just like that, despite the fact that I go around the country, as many of us do, and work in school communities. When it's your own school community, you do have that internal debate. You are kind of balancing, am I being a pest here? And the answer at the end of the day is no. You really got to stand up for it. So.
Because I think there's, oh, by the way, before I continue, I just want to remind everyone what Michele had said a little earlier, that we will be taking audience questions in a little bit, and if you don't want to ask them vis-a-vis one of our folks who are going to have a floating microphone, you can also tweet at that hashtag, and I'll try and keep up with them as we go on. But so you mentioned the idea of having open campuses, and obviously, there are certain considerations in a place like Boston University where lots of buildings. It's in the middle of the city, tens of thousands of people literally part of the community. Then also there's a question of open campuses, even at K through 12 schools, in terms of the sense of openness in the community. So can we talk a little bit about communication when there are threats or concerns or safety issues that an entire community needs to know about? Because I have to say, I'm very impressed with the texts that I get and the phone calls that I get. And is there, what's the cutting edge on that? Technologically wise, what's the thinking about how much communication should go out? Is there a bar at which a certain safety issue or threat has to cross before you tell everyone in the community?
We struggle with that all the time. We want to send out communication, but we don't want to send out so many that the students turn us out. We have the luxury here that we mandate all our students, they have to register for our emergency alerts. Faculty and staff don't have to, but we strongly encourage it. I think we only have about 50% maybe registered, and we try to get that higher. But I can tell you, every time we have an incident, there's a group of us that do get together, and we discuss, should we put on alert? Is it going to be beneficial to the community? And you really have to run that edge between too many alerts where students just turn you out, just another alert, versus an actual alert where they take it serious. So we do have a discussion. We don't just throw those out there. we really agonize over it.
Can I just give a pop quiz to everyone here? Who here gets the BU alerts? Very good. If anyone's a member of the BU community and they haven't signed up, do it now. I mean, but let's just again do a little survey here. When you get the alerts, do you read the text? Do you find them useful? Okay, what's your first reaction when you get them? Does it heighten your awareness? Do you get worried? Do you ignore it? I mean, shout outs and responses. Not everybody at once now. Okay, I'm just going to presume that these are right.
It's like, is it affecting me? Is it in my part of campus? That's my first question. Do I need to worry about it or not?
Okay. Do you find yourself waiting for like the follow-up alert that if there's a potential incident or something that kind of a stand down? Okay, good.
I think in terms of the communication, I had a situation with my own child where they were in a lockdown situation, and here I am, a superintendent, and I'm going back and forth texting, my own child about a situation that they're in. There's and the reason I say that is because what we're doing now more and more as superintendents is having to fight miscommunication. In this time of social media, usually many times even before we have an opportunity to communicate whatever's going on, there has been a massive amount of communication that's taken place. And that's just on the social media with mobile devices. And then you add Facebook to that. We talk about this all the time. Superintendents now and their administrations spend many, many hours undoing miscommunication, false information, because there's nothing worse than having people go in a lot of different directions on a particular issue. So communication is a real issue, but with social media, it's now become even more complex because there's not one source of information going out. There could be hundreds and thousands of sources.
What we struggle with that also is we want to be very quick with our communications. We want to be very timely, but we want to be accurate. We want to make sure we have the right information to put out there. So a lot of times, yes, we take some grief about, it took you an hour to put that alert out. Well, by the time our officers get there and get the real story of what actually happened, it changes 3 or 4 times by the time they really get to the bottom. So sometimes that accounts for the delay. We want to be timely, but we're certainly going to be accurate.
I'm wondering, are there lessons that can be applied from the communications protocols from larger institutions like the university to smaller environments like elementary, middle, high schools, local smaller school districts?
I think certainly. I think we in the K-12 communities rely a lot on what's going on, what's been learned in the higher ed communities, because they are more exposed. We have young adults that are living mostly on open campuses, that have an enormous amount of freedom, that have a lot of communication capability of their own. So I think we look a lot in the K-12 communities to these folks for, how are you handling this? Because generally the magnitude of that kind of issue is pretty great in the university communities. I think for us in the K-12 communities, that communication, we do our best in an emergency situation to try to keep that communication timely, accurate, and get it out as quickly as possible. And we do fight, like Andre's saying, we fight that information, those sort of leaks, that misinformation that goes out in an emergency as well. I think we see it more and probably more prevalently in the university community. So
the controversy is in a K-12 setting, there's going to be one agency who's probably responsible for sending out that alert. Mm-hmm. In a campus setting, you've got a couple different folks who come together, and often I'm not sure who sends it out here, but in certain schools, it's not the public safety director who has that ownership. So it's really important from a higher ed setting is to really address it earlier on in both accounts. So there's one message, one voice that's going out to the media before anyone else is. And to your point exactly, it is always very, very hard to match our public expectation of information with what they can really do. And so we have to understand that we can help them. You know, if we're not directly in an area to give really helpful information, don't tweet out or don't retweet or don't favorite things that may not be really accurate or vetted, because you're going to increase the likelihood of that popping up and distracting resources away from the actual you know, crime at hand. And in terms of communication, I mean, I think we do have to embrace social media. That is, in my personal viewpoint, the only true real-time mass notification, because no matter what, Facebook, Twitter is just fantastic. But as a quick plug for LiveSafe, which is the app that I helped develop, we try to kind of empower students to report things real time through the app, essentially. And you guys also have an application which you should use readily. And on that note, know that you don't have to report things that just like the most utmost extreme threats. It can be questions, it can be advice, it can be how do I get more information on this. Use it as a very constant way to communicate. My theory is that if students and faculty in the public safety build that relationship ahead of time, they will trust you when you put out the lockdown or active shooter, whatever it is, proactively versus, you know, disregarding it and things like that.
I think too, in our K-12 communities, a big component with this whole communication piece, just like you know, when we introduce technology for the physical plant, locking doors, buzzer systems, things like that. Just like there's some training and some sort of community staff development basically that has to happen there. It's the same thing for us with communication and how that communication goes out. So it's important that parents know the one channel they should be looking at for that information, that they are given guidelines as well. You know, please don't be passing on information that hasn't been validated, that hasn't been verified from us, from this one voice, one source. But I think also in terms of just creating that investment and getting people on board, there is a great amount of training that has to go into anything, whether we're talking about physical safety of the physical plant or whether we're talking about communication as well, because that goes to the psychological safety of the community.
I think it's really interesting to think about with this communication issue who the recipients are. And when you think about it at the higher ed level, primarily the recipients are going to be students. And at the secondary and elementary level, the recipients are primarily parents. And how much does that, I guess I'm kind of asking this question, how much does that change what type of information is sent out? And where is that fine line? You know, there's that fine line between sharing too much information and not enough information. You're going to get hammered either way probably, but it's a very difficult line to find sometimes.
Quick question, how many of your parents are also signed up for BU alerts that you know of?
Got one.
Okay.
A couple.
That should also be, that way they won't call you when they.
Yeah.
Parents, we don't let the parents sign up for our alert system. We have 42,000, almost 45,000
okay.
population, so it just bogged our system down.
Okay.
What we tell the parent, we'll tell our students here is if you get an alert, contact your parent, just let them know you're okay.
But they can go on Facebook as well or
Yes,
social media.
and it's tied to our Twitter. You can follow us at BU Police, and they can see the information on Twitter too.
Just as an example, though, of training the community for that, toward that communication, for us at Sandy Hook, when the tragedy began to unfold, and we were given a single mass notification via our cell phones and our landlines initially to our homes. But beyond that, social media took over, the texting took over. People were going to Facebook, people were going to Twitter to communicate and get information. So we had a tremendous amount of misinformation that occurred. My co-founding partner, Alyssa, you know, she was new to the community. She received 3 different answers as to where she was supposed to go to try to reunify with her daughter, what was going on. She was getting all sorts of wildly different stories. So that pre-planning, that training piece, I can't emphasize how important it is to make sure that whoever is the recipient, whether it's students in higher ed or whether it is parents in the K-12 setting, that people really are plugged into it and that they know where to go if they need information.
So communication is obviously absolutely essential when there is an identified concern. And even before that, in fact, and we talk about physical plant issues. But let's talk a little bit about way upstream and actually, and I know I'm looking at you, working with students, getting to know the student population, having teachers and SROs within schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I was growing up, I don't think we had an SRO. I'm not even sure, I'm pretty sure the concept didn't even exist.
We never had an SRO in any of the schools where I taught as an elementary teacher. It's fairly new in terms of getting SROs into our elementary schools and really establishing them more readily in our middle and high schools as well, nationally.
So how does that stand? What do you guys do?
I'll try not to be too wordy in answering this, but I think there's a couple of important points that have to be laid out. And the first one is the definition of what an SRO actually is. And there actually is a federal definition. And I'm not going to bore you with reading the whole thing to you, but I'll summarize it by saying that an SRO, School Resource Officer, is a trained, sworn, certified law enforcement officer. And the idea is they should be deployed in a community-based policing project, is the best way to say that. And that should be the approach to school-based policing, community-based policing. And as a matter of fact, when we train officers, the number one goal is to bridge the gap between law enforcement and youth. At the end of the day, that's the number one goal. And so, can I sit here and say that everybody does it that way? No, because not everybody goes through the proper training. But our members do, and that's the message we want to get out. So what we're looking for are officers that really have a desire to work with youth, have experience working with youth, have the right motivations. There's a collaborative effort going on between the school district and the law enforcement agency, and the officers are truly in there in a community-based policing environment. They're reaching out to students. We teach what's called the SRO triad concept, and that is that the SRO certainly has the role of being a law enforcement officer, no doubt about that, but they also are involved in informal counseling. If you're familiar with law enforcement officers at all, a lot of what we do out on the street outside of a school is informal counseling. We go to a domestic dispute, and the last thing we really want to do is take anybody to jail, so we kind of do some informal counseling to try and help resolve that. That's a lot of what we do. And then the other piece of it, the third piece, is the role of education. We train officers and encourage them to get in the classroom with students, which is a great way to connect. But officers also have a lot of experience to bring to bear to educate students. Just for example, at the high school level, we've got a lot of students who are becoming drivers. So the experience we can bring to bear in terms of distracted driving, drunk driving, just driving skills overall can really make a huge impact. So those are the kind of things that we're doing as SROs.
And what do you say to parents some of whom might feel, upon just hearing, okay, there's a police officer, a law enforcement officer in the school, maybe they don't feel so comfortable with that?
You know what's really interesting about that? SROs have been around since the 1950s. Most people don't realize that, but they really began to make their climb around 1994. And you can look at some of the data. It's kind of interesting that that's really when the climb started. And yet we had about 15 high-profile school shootings in the mid to late 90s that actually came after that spike started. And I remember when we started it in my own department, again, I wasn't involved with it at the time that it started, and I can remember when the officer first started at the high school, that was the first place they started. I do remember some people commenting, what are the police doing there? Why are the police at school so much? Well, as this program became more accepted and people saw what was going on, the comment, if the police car wasn't at the school, it became the reverse comment. Where's the SRO? Why is it why they're not here today? And so if it's done the right way, and I underscore the right way, I believe that parents as a whole come to accept what's going on and appreciate it. Some of the best relationships I had in the school environment were with parents, and I wasn't expecting that. And those friendships still go on today. And so that was a very valuable resource to us to have those relationships with parents also.
Just to jump on Lois, we have 54 sworn officers here at Boston University. I consider all my officers SROs. They do exactly that. They're sworn law enforcement officers. They have full arrest powers, fully armed. They investigate absolutely everything that happens here. But they're also very involved in our community. We do Public Safety Week. We do Coffee with the Cops. Yes, we give away free coffee. Yes, we share our donuts. But it's to break down those barriers so they get to know us and they get to trust us. So when something happens, they feel comfortable calling us.
Energy rings, right? Not donuts, energy rings.
Yes, that's what they are. That's what they are.
And from a superintendent's point of view, it's really important. The training is very important, but also the personality of the individual, because that's going to be key in how they relate to students. And I was telling Mo that in another district that I was in, the only person who got a standing ovation at graduation was the SRO every year, because over those 4 years, that person had developed a totally unique relationship with all of the students in the school. They become a part of a team. They meet with the principal, the assistant principals. They get to know the kids, and also they serve another purpose of bridging the weekend to Monday. So they're the bridge between Friday and Monday. So when you come back together as a school community on Monday, you're able to tie into the knowledge that the SRO has of kind of what was happening in your community over the weekend, and it really becomes a very proactive role in a school district also.
Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry, and I'll be quiet about this, but I think this is really, really important. One of the things we get hit with sometimes are the issues of arrests. We are sometimes, people will say, all that's happening is you're going in and arresting more kids and putting them in the juvenile justice system. And I have to tell you that if the program's done the right way, it's the right officer, they're properly trained, the opposite is happening. The exact opposite is happening. And I know I'm in communication with our members. If it's the goal of an officer to go in and see how many kids they can arrest, they don't need to be there. That's clearly the wrong person. Not that we don't make arrests when they're justified, but that is not the overall goal. SROs get in there and they learn how to work with the school administration to cut those arrests down. And when the SRO is engaged and they've got the relationships, they're much more likely to be able to help kind of settle a situation down as opposed to stirring it up to the point that you've got to make an arrest. It's interesting, from 1994 to 2009, and this is data from the Department of Justice, juvenile arrest rates in this country are down by 50%. And some of you may be shocked by that. Down by 50%. Now, I'm not saying that SROs deserve all the credit for that, but I'm going to say they deserve a little bit of credit. And it's one of the things we work very hard on.
Well, I have a note here that says some Twitter questions are coming in, so I'm going to ask one of them. By the way, again, the hashtag is a safer tomorrow. So this is from, sorry, I have a habit of identifying who the tweets are coming from when we do it on our show, so am I going to presume that you sent a tweet because you don't want to be identified? But too bad. Transparency. This is from someone who identifies as TB, who says, for Kristina, what have you found impressive that law enforcement are doing training-wise? Anything you could share?
Absolutely. Law enforcement are doing a lot of amazing things. I'll speak quickly. Okay, just quick 2-minute history. Law enforcement changed everything. Is TB law enforcement or a student? Do we know? Law enforcement. Okay. ATV. Basically being proactive. So for those that just don't live in this space as much as we do, after Columbine, everything shifted. So Columbine, and for law enforcement, is very much campus safety started protecting the building from us. They didn't always think about us as individuals in that. And with Columbine, the response was obviously the perimeter. So they got there, they secured the perimeter, they did not go inside for a long time. Virginia Tech, with him barricading the doors and creating that delay, changed that in a very big way. So law enforcement, the ones that I've seen that are the best and they're the most proactive, are the ones who continuously train, both mentally and physically. These guys are fully ready to go in and respond to situations and also be community service leaders that they reach out. And on that level you talked about, I think being part of the safety team is not only SROs engaging it one way, but you guys on the other end. Wherever I go, I make a point to be like, hey, to the police officer, just in case you want to know those people. It'd be really great when your bike is stolen or your laptop is stolen, which is much more likely to happen than anything else on this, any campus, not just Boston's campus. It'd be great to say, hey, John, they're people as well. And the energy ring was just a joke, but it's like a good one. They have the same fears and concerns, and they only want to watch out for our well-being. So best practices, it's continuously kind of struggling with that mindset of what's the next thing that we could be waiting for. Is it a bomb? Is it a knife attack? Is it a shooter? Is it outside threats? There's a lot of great programs out there called, one is Alert. ALERRT. It's an active shooter training program. I think the ones that also take a step out and really look at how do you communicate to students and faculty and educators, K-12 higher ed, in ways that they can understand. I think the best law enforcement I've interacted with are the ones that are good presenters. They understand that, we as students shouldn't have to worry about this 24/7. We as faculty shouldn't have to worry about that threat all the time. We have to communicate that in ways that they will understand. So that might mean being less forceful, more descriptive, right, of the actual threat and risk that pertains to the campus, and proactive. And free food always helps as well.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
That's been tested and proven.
So I want to ask another question that's come over Twitter. It's a really good one from Mr. P. DiDomenica, retired Lieutenant, Massachusetts State Police. Really good question. The majority of school shootings involve present or former students. What can be done to identify such students and intervene?
This is a really great opportunity for us to talk a little bit about threat assessment and threat assessment management. So,
There's a lot of identifiers. Obviously, one of the things we actually do here at Boston University is we monitor social media. We have software that we can plug into keywords, whether it's shoot, kill, die. And we monitor that social media from, I think it's 9 different sites now at this point. Facebook, Twitter, Yik Yak, to name a few. But that's one of the things, just to identify what they may be saying, because a lot of these people do put it out on social media before it happens. The other things is just getting input from our students, faculty, and staff when somebody is starting to change their appearance, their behavior, what they're talking about, how they're starting to talk about death and dying and shooters, and oh yeah, they're agreeing with somebody who just did a shooting somewhere, and reporting them to us, because at BU we do have a threat assessment team that can get together and hopefully get that student or person necessary help.
For a school situation, a small school situation, it's really about creating relationships with the staff and students. And in the district that I'm in now, it's a small urban district in central Massachusetts. I've been really surprised whenever we've done a survey of, how comfortable do you feel going to an adult, or going to somebody in the school community to talk or to bring information. And we always score almost 90%. And not just one adult, but 2 or 3. So it's really building that kind of a culture. And a couple of years ago, we had a situation where 2 students came forward and they'd been hearing a conversation in the hallway that possibly involved a weapon, possibly involved other things. We took action with the school resource officer. The action was not over the top, but it was an immediate action. And it turned out that that's what it was. It was talk, it was related to other things, and once all the pieces came together, and then a few people said, well, look what you've done. Look at why did people overreact? And everyone stepped back and said, no, this is exactly what we want. We, just like you with the stone in the door, right? We would rather go through all of that and then at the end find out that, there was miscommunication there, somebody didn't hear it right or whatever, and be able to then all take a deep breath and know that nothing was going to happen, than to have people not feel they can come forward with that kind of information and then be on the end of some sort of a trauma.
There's actually a follow-up question because Scott, you mentioned Yik Yak.
Yes.
So Robin Pinella sent us a question. Says, regarding social media, have you seen a spike in threats via anonymous apps like Yik Yak? And how can we help?
I think there was only a couple instances on Yik Yak where it was actually a threat and they did follow up. I think Yik Yak actually turned the information over to law enforcement, but we haven't seen a lot of those. If somebody thinks they're going to be confidential on Yik Yak and make a threat, I think Yik Yak's going to give the information up because they don't want to be holding that type of information.
I want to talk too a little bit about how our K-12s are learning from the university communities, especially in terms of threat assessment. I think it's relatively a new concept for a lot of our K-12 school systems. And I know Andre's coming from mostly urban experiences, and I think that's a little bit of an exception because I think and you can talk a little bit about this too, safety, in the urban communities, safety threats and hazards have been at a higher level than some of our suburban and rural K-12 communities. So I'm finding that there's a lot of momentum behind the federal government's see something, say something, and I think we're having a lot of success with that. Where I see in a lot of our K-12 communities, particularly those suburban and rural, is the next step. So if a student comes to an administrator, if a student has the courage, or a parent has the courage, or a staff member has the courage to come forward with information, they're usually going to take that information to somebody within the school community. They're not likely to go to law enforcement first. And then there needs to be this predetermined set of steps that we go through in terms of what our threat assessment is, what steps do we do next, so that we're not making it up as we go and perhaps creating an overreaction or, God forbid, an underreaction in a real event. So I think that developing those threat assessment teams in our K-12s, just like we have in the universities, where, hey, we just got a threat off of Yik Yak, the team comes together, puts their heads together, and the best decisions that tend to be made in the education communities are the ones where there's a lot of heads, there's a lot of perspectives that are coming together to make that decision. So I don't know if you have any experience there, Andre, in terms of what sort of steps or teaching or staff development or community education you provide in the K-12 to keep that process going. So it's not just see something, say something, it's the next step of do something. What do we do? Or is it okay for us as educators to now share that information with law enforcement? Are we violating FERPA? What types of channels do you create in order to make that happen, that next step?
Well, unfortunately, in most of our schools now, it's part of the regular training. So just like we have a whole list of training that needs to be done, and this is the regular part of training. And I think you're right. It's the interesting contradiction is that a lot of the urban districts are more aware of this, more alert of it, and thinking about it more. But when you see where actually most of the major situations have taken place, they have not been in urban districts. They have been in suburban districts. So there's sometimes you can feel comfortable and you can feel less like people who leave their doors unlocked because they've never been broken into. But once you are, you have something different. So I think that same kind of alertness that's already been part of an urban approach to safety is now a much more common experience.
So if I can say, we're getting a lot of good questions coming in, and I'd love to get as many of them to you panelists as possible. So this is my gentle way of saying I'm going to throw a lot more at you at a slightly higher pace. Gosh, they're so good, and they're on a variety of topics. So forgive me if we kind of bounced around, but we've got a good variety of perspectives here. All right, so how about this one? This is from Emily J. Newberg, who asks, who's responsible for training staff, or in her case, university staff, for emergency situations, and how do we keep our students safe? So an educator asks.
For emergency situations, the police do most of the training here. Well, it's the RAs, security staff. We usually start it right at the beginning of the summer, even as soon as they start to report. So we provide a lot of training to a lot of the student leaders. And then hopefully it goes out to the students from the student leaders.
If they wanted to invite you into one of their classrooms, would one of your officers go and present?
We actually, we do fraternities, we do sororities, we do athletic clubs. We've done a number of different groups and organizations. We even do departments, whether it's student health services. We'll be doing the dean's office next week, and we continue to do any and all departments. Actually, we got CLOP coming up.
Is it by request, though?
A lot is by request, but oftentimes once you do one group, they hear about it. And I've found it's better to request it versus us to force it on them, because they're really gonna want it. Otherwise, we won't get any attendance.
So how about this one then? So this is a sobering question, but a very important one. So far in 2015, and we're only in October, there have been 305 mass shootings. How can we as education professionals remain positive?
The definition of a mass shooting is more than 4 people.
We have to start there with the FBI's definition of what a mass shooting is, and that's 4 or more casualties to start with. I think that right there is probably one of the biggest issues I think that we face in terms of trying to inform people and not scare people. And when we talk about mass shootings, when we talk about really what I think is the worst nightmare for most of us is this idea of a shooting attack on our schools. There are a lot of numbers that you hear, and I have yet to hear that high of a number at this point, but it comes down to what are we defining as a mass shooting. Sometimes organizations that may be trying to mobilize people behind their agenda will inflate those numbers. We'll see that a shooting is being counted in there that perhaps was a suicide on campus. Of course, it may have involved a gun, and therefore it was a shooting death. But when you're thinking of mass shootings, you're probably thinking of something along the lines of Virginia Tech, of Sandy Hook, of Columbine, or even some of the other tragedies smaller in magnitude, like Chardon, Ohio, or the Oregon community that we just learned about recently. So I think it's really important to look really critically at those numbers and how we're defining what a shooting is or what any kind of massive tragedy in a community is to begin with.
Just to add to that quickly, that was a fantastic explanation of that. They're very different, and I think it's important to look at the risk profile. Sometimes they could be, to your point about suicide or whatever else, a lot of it could be domestic violence, and that's when we forget about.
We are seeing that counted in there, yeah.
Schools are workplaces as well, and so a lot of times it could be a spouse, a divorce, a husband of either a student or a faculty member as well, happens to be near a school, not the same thing as a targeted act of violence where someone picks a school for that reason. And so is it a topic, is it an issue? Of course, it's one of concern, but to your point, it's depending on the immediate perception, it's cited a little bit differently. And if anyone is curious more about primarily like active shooters, if you Google FBI active shooter report, there's a great one of about 100 or 300 or so that have happened that kind of goes more into more like targeted specific acts of violence versus just something that happened across the street near a school proximity.
Right.
That makes sense.
I take your point, but nevertheless, I think
It is unsettled, yeah.
You hear the number, and the FBI said it's 4 or more, but that's 4 people.
Absolutely.
And families in their communities whose lives have been irrevocably changed. So, I mean, I think the question, how do we as a community remain optimistic and positive? Nevertheless, it is an important one, even if we have proper perspective on what the actual numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I think starting with the perspective is really important. I think we have to know what we're talking about. But I think that in our communities, what I'm finding as I travel around, and I think that you would probably agree with me, Mo and Kristina, that the more information, the more options, the more education and empowerment we receive, whether it's BUPD coming into our classrooms to orient us with the physical space, the tools and the materials that we have to enhance our safety in an emergency situation, whatever that training is, I feel like that is the most directly impactful upon the sense of confidence and the sense of mastery over our own circumstances that we feel in the communities. So I think one shooting, one person, one event certainly is too many. One of these is absolutely too many. It's something that we want to continue to work against to continue to bring that threat as low as possible. But I think that what it really comes down to is giving people a sense of control over their circumstances. And even if we are talking about, let's say 100 mass shootings, whoever is doing the counting, I think that although it is statistically more rare for a shooting incident to happen in a school, it is nevertheless one of those worst nightmares. It's one of the things that keeps students up at night, educators up at night, it keeps the police up at night. It's something that is ever present in our minds because we don't know when or where something like that may occur. We do our best. We try to be vigilant. We try to be stakeholders in our own safety and in the community. But I think that right there is the reason for this national conversation, this national desire to keep talking about this. And I think it comes down to empowering people with education, options, and training.
Well, we actually have an audience that's full of people who want to be very positively proactive about this, because we've got another question here from someone from Alpha Epsilon Phi. What do you think Greek life as a community can do to make the campus safer? I think it's a good question because, the schools, whether universities, schools have like different cultures within, every school has unique cultures within it. It's within the broader community that intersect with different parts of the life of students, whether it's the university level or even at K through 12 level. So they can each do different things based on those intersections.
Greek life is part of this community, and they should be positive community members. They should be pro-bystanders. So if they see something, they should be saying something, and I think that's the way they can be helping keep our community safe. I just want to go back to the other question about being positive, and on that question, Kristina and Michele here, if that's not a sign of being positive, I don't know what is, quite honestly. So just seeing these two when they walk in and seeing their smile after something, the tragedy they've been through, to me, that's about positive as you're gonna get.
Is it okay to ask? I could tweet it, but so I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and I very clearly remember nuclear war drills sitting under the desk. It scared me, and I remember nightmares about it, but I didn't really know what it was about. I worry about our kids. We're doing these Alice safety drills in our
Active shooter trainings. Mm-hmm.
my 3 children's elementary school is Alice. Yes. We've been doing these drills with teachers, and now we're talking about doing them with kids. How do we not make our kids have nightmares and stay up at night, but
Still keep them safe.
Give them options, tell
Yeah,
them what to do.
I love this question. I get this question a lot. I'm a former elementary school teacher. I'm a parent myself, and I'm a safety advocate. So I want people to have as much information and power over their circumstances as possible. But I also realize that certainly the information that I would provide in my 2nd grade classroom to my students, the training, the words that I would use, those are not the same words that I would use. That's not the same level of training that I would provide to this group of people. And I think to super simplify it, I always harken back to fire safety. It's one of the most successful safety campaigns in the United States here. You look around this room, we've got a fire retardant floor, ceiling, walls, lighted exit signs, fire poles that notify the fire department immediately of our emergency. I could go on and on and on about the technology and innovation in this room. But beyond that, what we have done, beginning with kids at the preschool level, is we've given them information in bearable, manageable bits. We began introducing to our preschool children, I used to be a preschool teacher, the concept of fire safety with dressing the firefighter. Just meet the guy or the girl and climb in the truck and see the tools and learn about this community helper who's here to keep you safe. Learn about things like stop, drop, and roll. All of those things that you all remember that are so ingrained in your way of thinking, so much so that if the fire alarm went off right now, everybody in this room would know exactly what to do. But we have yet to, light a classroom on fire. We've yet to do anything like that in terms of preparing people in a school community for fire. We just haven't needed to, because what they've really needed is the information and the options to become empowered for fire safety. And I think if you boil it down like that in our elementary schools, especially, I think that's where people struggle the most with active shooter training. They think, oh my gosh, okay, I could see it with the high schoolers. I could see us maybe boiling it down a little bit more for the middle schoolers. I can certainly see it with the staff members. But how in the heck are we going to introduce this information to our K-5? And Megan and I actually talked about this, and she was saying, my daughter bounds into school every day. She loves going there. I don't want to burst that bubble. I want my kid to love going there, and I don't want her to think, oh my gosh, there's a risk that an intruder might come in at any moment. So I think it's about taking the information, and you mentioned Alice. This is very popular here in Massachusetts. It's one of many active shooter training programs. But I think taking that information that was developed maybe for a higher level and doing what educators do, boiling it down, differentiating it so that it's appropriate for the elementary, the early ed groups, the special education students that we're going to have in our schools, the English as a second language learners that we're going to have. That's what educators do. So I think when you realize that we've done that before in other areas, and let me tell you, fire emergencies were the terror of the 50s. I mean, people were horrified with some of the tragedies. Our Lady of Angels in Chicago that killed I think over 150 in a school building. This was the greatest nightmare of its time. And it was a huge adjustment for them to begin considering fire alarms, that scary sound, drilling to get out of the building quickly. All of these things were certainly cultural adjustments, but we've done that and we've done it well. We can do it in other areas in terms of our security, in terms of violence prevention, in terms of cyber safety, and the many other safety issues that we're seeing in our school communities today.
Michele, can I throw in a follow about the environment, the emotional environment of a school? Because Kevin Quinn, wherever you are out there, is asking how
He's in Arizona.
How does the panel feel about the arming of school staff members?
This is a great question. You want to take this one?
My personal opinion, that it's not something that I think is necessary or I approve of. I think there are a lot of other things that we can do, in terms of safety. And my concern would be now we're responsible for who, for how, for the training, is it a volunteer?
It's expensive and time intensive.
Is it a legislative regulation? Is it law? It's a small snowball, and once we roll that down the hill, we need to know we're not going to be able to stop that, and there's going to be all kinds of next steps that are going to happen. I do want to address that part about the parent. First of all, children are much more resilient than we give them credit for. And the other thing we need to know is that if we're not giving them the information, they're watching television.
Yeah.
So they're being inundated with all of these violent images. And do we leave them with no context? Do we leave them, so the more information we give them, we now create a safe place for them to bring those images and understand them. And also, they don't have a concept of what could happen to them. That's why we freak out as parents, because we know all the hundreds of things that could happen. And I think that creates anxiety, and the children pick up on that anxiety. So if they're going to get information about these traumas and these dangers in the world, we either can let them just get that information, or we can provide ways, piece by piece, age appropriate, to then say, yes, that's happening out there. Here's how we're going to keep you safe. Here's how you can keep yourself safe. And when they feel empowered for that, it changes the attitude.
It really does. Yeah.
Our recommendation as an organization is that the only person that should be armed in a school environment is a properly trained law enforcement officer. We recognize at the end of the day, every community is going to make their own decision about this, and even states have jumped in on this, but that's still our stance on the issue, and we firmly believe that. But I also want to add to that, ma'am, your question was an excellent one, and I believe that the issue of deterrence cannot be overlooked here. There have been very, very few school shootings that have taken place where there's an active law enforcement presence. I know of a couple of times it's happened, and you know what's happened? The SRO has ended the situation. All right? One in California, one in Colorado just a couple of years ago. And that's usually what happens. If it happens in that situation, properly trained SROs know how to respond to and deal with those situations. There are about 100,000 school buildings in this country, and we estimate that there are about 14,000 school resource officers. So that should tell you something as well. But you can't, this is one of those things that's very difficult to quantify, and that is what doesn't happen as a result of law enforcement presence. How much crime is deterred just by the mere presence, and you just can't quantify it. I have to believe a lot, and especially in the school environment. You know, I was talking about the transition that happened from why are the police there to why are the police not there. When you see that police car parked in front of the school, or you know that there's an active law enforcement presence there, especially an SRO with that community-based process going on, it's a difference maker, and we know that it is.
So can I, we've got another great question here, because when we're talking about safe schools, and obviously a lot of the focus tends to be on shooting and gun violence. But Olivia Linder, thank you for sending this question, Olivia, asked a really smart question about non-shooting related risks, like sexual assault or other assaults. What kind of new prevention methods or strategies are or should be in place?
Well, you have to add to that also, edged weapons are an issue. I know we're talking about sexual assault, but there's a lot of other issues other than shootings. Most schools are never going to experience an active shooter event. They're just not. But we've got many things that are going on every day they're going to experience. So what do you put in place to prevent some of the sexual harassment issues even? Sometimes it's the simplest things. It's like kicking the rock out of the prop door. And when I started working in schools, one of the things that really bothered me was when, especially in the high schools in our community, when classes would change, there was no adult presence in the hallways. And that seemed to be when, not necessarily sexual abuse, but there was some sexual harassment going on in the hallway. And when we identified that and pushed the school on having adult presence, almost that omnipresence to some degree, especially with the restroom issues. But when we started paying attention to that, things changed. So again, sometimes it's the simplest things you do on the front end to deter some of those things that happen just in the hallway or restrooms.
And I think what's amazing about that too is that when you offer that sort of that global, those basic security, those basic awareness, those basic surveillance type of practices, you're bringing the danger level down for multiple threats. So whether it happens to be somebody who doesn't belong on the campus there, intent on doing some harm, or whether it's sexual harassment, or someone who has a bladed, a knife on campus or whatever, though all of those things come down. So our safety practices, although it's nice to have very focused efforts, for the most part, I think it's basic common sense that we're applying in our school communities that's providing us the best results.
And we jump on that common sense a lot here, as far as taking the earbuds out, putting the phone away, stay in the well-lit, well-populated areas, don't take those little alleyways, walk with friends. So it goes back to common sense, even at this level.
So let's circle back for a moment, because there's some pretty large umbrella issues here in the very complicated world of the question of school safety, because where did George Tweet go? Allie Michaels asked, what initiatives are in place to combat the stigma of seeking mental health counseling? And how can we leverage such initiatives to keep schools safe?
I would say that probably the number one thing that I'm seeing in schools that is combating that issue is just the presence of more guidance counselors, more school psychologists, more social workers. Because the more that we have in terms of that kind of expertise, that kind of staff development, just like we were talking about, dropping the barriers between the police and the students and the staff, it's the same thing with mental health. So, if you realize that there are people in your community that are there to help you, that you're not, signing up for any big commitment to just be in touch with those people and know that they're your resource, I think that's the most effective thing that I see is just having those professionals in our community, providing that level of education and support and interacting just like we want the police to be in our school communities. It does.
Our schools have changed, and a lot of people who talk about schools haven't been in a school for 20 or 30 years. The schools have changed, and the environment has changed. Mental health does not carry the stigma that it did because of community education, the kind of education that's going on out there. So many of the things that, and I'll say me, my generation, but even generations after me grew up with as unacceptable, had a stigma associated with them, they don't have that stigma anymore. So the more you create that openness and that availability, and we're changing the kind of people we hire. When a guidance counselor leaves in my community, I'm hiring an adjustment counselor, a behaviorist, a psychologist. Hiring a different kind of person because the whole environment has changed and the needs have changed. So, I think it's there, and it's happening in the schools themselves.
You said once too, Andre, that you're just seeing a far greater need now than ever before coming through our school communities. And I don't know if you can speak to that too, and perhaps you guys can, but just more and more that our students are coming to school with every day. More concerns, more difficulties, more struggles there.
Recently on BU Today, which is an open paper, basically said 1 in 6 of dealing with anxiety and 1 in 8 are dealing with depression. So it's, the numbers are high, and I think more have seek counseling. I think it's more accepted now among the population. I don't think it's as big a stigma as everybody seems to be talking about.
Well, I think one way to promote that, sorry to jump in real quickly, is to talk about that. If you had a positive experience with the counseling center in your school, to tell your friend, because most likely you'll probably be the first person who can feel that so-and-so might be having an issue or a hard time, make them aware of those resources. I did not have a very positive experience with Virginia Tech's Counseling Center right afterwards, just because I think I freaked them out with my crazy stories, and they were just overwhelmed. It's a very good center, but I kind of realized that it was almost like dating. You had to find a good counselor and find someone that you really relate with. And so while that might not be necessarily one center, it could be somewhere else that does exist for you, but urge whether it's your colleague, your spouse, your friend, to seek that out, because I think therapy is it's like the best friend you can pay for that has no bias towards your outcome. They only
I have to
your
totally agree with that statement too. I think for us, it was a little tiring, and we were tempted to give up at times, but for our family, we continued with the dating process until we found the right match, and it's been a godsend for us.
So we've got a couple questions from the audience here. Up there, that's everyone.
Along the lines of training, not just in the schools, but with families in particular, or even within the schools. I was thinking in terms of is the SROs prepare them to maybe start teaching teachers as well as parents, and maybe in some schools like high schools, how to do civilian arrests. And if that's been used already, and if not, why not? And I was thinking one of the ways of being able to use that civilian arrest would be, for instance, like in physical ed, do role plays where they take turns. If somebody's looking a certain way or seem to have something or the other, it's just sort of a broad statement, but I'm wondering, because at one point it's been excluded that weapons, not everybody could have weapons and so on. So it seems to me that, like somebody mentioned, along the lines of in the hallway, no matter how many adults are there. I work in a public school, and I work in the district, and I visit different schools, and there's many times, even though the teachers are standing outside their class monitoring, there are those gaps of students where harassment and hazing could be going on. And so it's just, but I think that empowering all the students to become having that sense of I owe it to the school to be able to do a civilian arrest if need be.
You want me to answer that, don't you?
Mike answers.
I was like,
Be quiet over there. I think one of the biggest things that we need the educators to focus on in that environment is the school discipline piece. I think training civilians how to affect arrests for us would be a huge liability issue. I don't think you would see that happen. I appreciate the question, but I just got to be direct and honest with you. I don't think you would see that happen from our end, from the liability standpoint.
What I understand so far, what a person can't do is put handcuffs on another person, but they could restrain them until the SRO comes or a police officer.
The best idea is to call the police and let the police handle it. I don't see civilians arresting each other. I just think it would really get really messy as far as the laws.
The question here, sure. I'm the oldest person in this room, but I am a grandmother of kids that are in K through 12. So at any rate, I feel like there's a big elephant in the room, and that's the word gun, which nobody has mentioned yet. And I'm all for safer schools and doing all that you're doing. I commend you all, and I hope that we can make progress in this regard in these schools. But what about gun control? How do you people feel about gun control, gun legislation? I'm ready to go out in the street now, and I think we all should be ready to go out in the street, because otherwise you're not going to get any changes. So you have less to do to make the schools safe if we get rid of guns. So maybe you can address that. Thank you.
I'll start. That was, who's buying the first glass of wine for this one? No. I completely agree with you. And my first response is we need more people like you to get in the street and to put the signs and to fund and to vote and to do all that. Absolutely. Thank you. I will say as a caveat, I purposefully am not actively involved in gun violence prevention because I believe in the preventative piece. I believe guns are a huge, huge part of it. But when you look at school safety from a broader standpoint, as you mentioned, we have knives, we have bombs. It just depends what piece of the puzzle you want to go towards. And so when people skew statistics in ways of, mass violence and X, Y, Z, in reality, if you really care, we should be like you. We should be out there and speaking to our listeners about it. I don't like guns, and I agree, the less the better. But again, I'll speak to my example only. If someone is really, really down the pathway of violence to the point where they want to commit such a targeted act, they will find a way to do it. But there are great, after most school shootings or acts of violence, there are great advocates. One from Virginia Tech is named Carlin Goddard. He made a documentary, but he was interested, called Living for 32. And he went around to about 6 different states and showed how easy it is to buy a gun without a background check, which is absolutely ridiculous. And of course, it ties back to mental health as well, because we have to have good tracking of these individuals to make sure that they're not there. But I think it depends on which piece of it you really want to tackle, but guns are, of course, a very big, important part of that.
Yeah, I think guns are certainly a part of safety. Like you said, the elephant in the room, we have to acknowledge that that's something that is presenting a problem for us. I think in terms of school safety, and when we look at the types of violence, the types of safety issues, and there are multiple. There's weather safety that we have to consider. I mean, just 6 months after our tragedy in Sandy Hook, 7 children were killed in their school, in the hallway of their classroom when an F5 hit the school. This is an area that was, presumably well prepared for these types of emergencies. But I think it comes down to the prevention piece. So whatever it is that we're looking at or for, it's prevention that I think probably all of us here on this panel are most focused on. It's what we have the most control over. It's what's proven, what's known. It's what we can rely upon. It's what we can do in real time today in our schools.
I'd like to make a comparison that I think might be helpful here, because I'm on the receiving end, correct, of the violence or the violent act or whatever it is. And I'd like to make a comparison right now to the opioid crisis, because I think there's a lot of similarities. Because now as a school superintendent, I'm actually more worried about students dying from an overdose. I'm being asked as a school district to carry Narcan now in our nurse's office. So what happens is there's an origin of something, just like the opioid is a good thing if you're in pain. But if there's too much of it and it's too available and it's everywhere, then it can turn and be used for something that's wrong. Weapons are the same way. There are a lot of good reasons and good ways to use weapons. If they're out there a lot, then someone can take that good thing and use it in a bad way. As a school superintendent, unfortunately, the schools, and we're on the receiving end of that. So we're working at it from both ways. There was legislation just passed in Massachusetts about opioids in the schools. There's legislation looking at the availability of it. So even though they're two different things, they're the same kinds of things. There are things that are out there, there's things that can be used for good, but there are also things that can be used for bad. And given that schools are part of the community, these things come into our communities, and our responsibility is to prepare students, to educate students, and then to do whatever we can to protect them from whatever those things are.
I think the parallels are really helpful. I think when we're looking at safety, these are emotional issues. These are things that a lot of us are very passionate about, and I think that stepping back sometimes and looking at parallels that we have in our communities it provides tremendous perspective.
And most dangerous is these guns get in the hand of somebody who has some mental challenges, and we really have to address those issues as far as identifying those people.
So another question from the audience. This is from Brett. Brett says, at a place like a tuition-driven college with low enrollment, how do we justify costs for these safer, great solutions when there are budget issues? And actually, this links back to my little comment to you, Michele, earlier. I didn't mean for it to be facetious, but when the rubber meets the road, and we want to have more programming, we want to have more professionals, it does cost money So, I mean, how do we deal with that direct challenge?
Schools are really struggling with this nationwide because it's something I think that we all want, we all agree upon it. It's something that we've discovered these are known and proven methods to reducing violence and increasing safety in our communities. But yeah, we've got that challenge and we don't have at this point enough national discussion, awareness, and support to generate the kind of funding that we really do need on a federal and on a state level. So schools are really trying to think outside the box. And in the K-12s, I see doing this a lot. Really trying to come together as a community, trying to explore resources from the business community, applying for grants, which can be tedious and time-consuming and expensive in its own right. But I think people are left to try to problem solve for the things that they need in their school communities. And Andre, you can probably talk about that challenge most directly.
Well, it's just the reality of whatever these things are, they come with a cost, and oftentimes they come in the form of legislation that, with that legislation now comes a responsibility, and it's either a cost in money or in staff or changing staff.
How's everyone doing? This is a very warm lecture hall. You're having some of you are still in college, so you're thinking, I've been in lectures like this. I didn't make it all the way through. But this is far more interesting. Did I see a hand go anywhere? Yes, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Alex, I'm here at WBUR, and I come from China. Thanks. So talking about safety issue, I know we talk about social media and whatnot. And then I think BU as a diverse university has thousands of students coming from different countries. We have different backgrounds and culture and whatnot. And I bet the same thing for K-12 schools. I think they're increasing international students over there. So how are we adjusting it? How are BUPD or different law enforcement or school trying to keep international students safe?
I think we're trying to keep the international students safe just like we're trying to keep everybody else safe. I think we're all one population. I don't think we're separating international students from American students. I think we all have the same responsibility to keep everybody safe.
Right. I remember how we were talking about Facebook and Twitter.
I'm sorry.
Facebook and Twitter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And coming from China, we don't really use Facebook or Twitter because it's blocked back in China, so we don't have the habit to check it whenever something happens. And for parents, for example, they don't really speak English, and nor is it effective for a university to reach out to them. So I think there's a different issue there. So just wondering, how are we adjusting it?
I think that's a really fascinating point that you just brought up, is that, we're talking about, raising kids here in America, starting with the pre-K with basic safety and, increasing that in a graduated progression to work toward independence. But we're doing that for the most part with the assumption that these kids are coming up in American culture and the American education system. So I think that what you're talking about is a really unique challenge. It's folks coming from a completely different culture where they may not have any exposure whatsoever to some of the dangers that we're discussing here tonight. And I think, I'm a teacher, so it shouldn't be any surprise that I feel that education is the place to address that. But providing that level of education and providing that sort of orientation, I think, is probably the best answer that we could give for anyone who's coming into our community. Even if it's a student coming from the West Coast over here, there's certainly different things that you have to become oriented with, like the snowpocalypse that could happen again this winter. But if you go out to the West Coast, you're also looking at earthquake hazards and things like that. So I think that's an important thing to consider, is that not everybody in your community right here, right now, has the same level of safety preparedness and training. It's a good point.
I think I saw another hand. So we'll take one more question, and I've got a final wrap up for everybody.
My name's Katie No. I'm in administrative support here at BU studying higher ed admin, and I just wondered if any of you had any thoughts on some things that universities are doing to decrease information siloing, some best practices, or maybe some things that we could be doing better.
Threat assessment teams. Basically, yes. Communication is a great place to start. So it all starts with education, awareness, and prevention. So the best thing you can do is invite someone like Mr. Pare or others into your office and have them do a safety training. Know what your options are. I can't speak to the different ways that they could reach out to them, but I mean, there's different ways to funnel information into that threat assessment team, whether it's through the application, whether it's through email, whether it's calling them. Everyone in your, let's say, office needs to know not only what the risks are behaviorally, but what the school can do about those, and be empowered and reminded to report that. Because unless it's almost like a muscle, and until you kind of keep telling people ahead of time, okay, yes, don't disregard that door, they might let one or two slip. But truly, I mean, we're talking about threat assessment, threat management teams. They are one of the best kind of proven preventative ways to look at people of concern and get people help before a larger issue happens.
We have a really interesting group here in the Northeast for our K-12s, the NEMLEC STARS, and this is a group that was initiated by local law enforcement folks, and what it's become is this network of school superintendents, guidance counselors, school psychologists, educators, and law enforcement folks and emergency responders. And so when I get a threat, say in my school, if I'm a superintendent, I have this network to reach out to. Not only do I have my immediate threat assessment team, not only do I have my folks there in school, but I have this other group that I can just kind of get a gut check with. And I've got these resources and these professionals and these people that are not maybe reacting with an emotional or a fear factor that I might be facing within my school community. So I think the more that we develop that internal threat assessment team and make sure that it's varied and it has the representation from a variety of stakeholder groups is wonderful. But we also want to have a larger network. For us, after Sandy Hook, after our tragedy occurred, our whole community was pretty much devastated. So we really needed a larger network. We really needed folks from all different walks of life and perspectives and professional backgrounds that could support us and that could help us. So I think in so many ways, to avoid that siloing effect, we just want to see as much teamwork and gathering together as possible.
So I'm going to take the last question from me. By the way, I have to say that even though we're a small house here today and not a jam-packed one, this was one of the most effective uses of a Twitter hashtag for questions that I've seen. Really, I mean, I've done some others of these, and most of the questions are kind of ridiculous. But these were, without exception, these were good. We only got to about a third of them. So well done, everybody. It's a great audience. Really good.
So you're saying that we have homework to do?
Yes, all the hashtag you can respond over Twitter, actually. I mean, it's really very good, despite the heat in here. So my last question for all of you is clearly there's a lot of interest here about being proactive, being aware, being contributing parts of the community, whether it's universities or K through 12 when it comes to safety. So from each of you, if you could just briefly tell us, as we all walk out tonight, what is the one thing you think we should either be thinking or doing or incorporating into our lives, or how we operate as members of the community, beginning tonight, starting tomorrow?
Well, schools, especially the K through 12 schools, are, they really are the community centers. And so when I mentioned earlier that school safety is everyone's business, it really is. And, if you have the opportunity to get involved in a school safety team at your school or on your campus, and I think students are great advocates to have on a school safety team. I mean, it's your campus. You should care about the safety of it. And so the same thing happens at the K through 12 schools, just as you did. Be proactive. I think you said proactive, and it's one of the things that as law enforcement, when we have the opportunity to work in schools, it is one of the most proactive opportunities that we have. So I would just encourage you to be proactive, get involved in what's going on your campus, whether at the secondary elementary level or the higher ed level. It's important that you're involved.
I would agree. I would say realize that safety is a very individual, personal thing, and so whatever you do from today, decide what it's going to be. It's not enough to leave here and be inspired by our stories. I know we can be very funny and we try to be, but at the end of the day, figure out what is your piece of the world, whether you're a student or administrator or faculty, and say, how I'm going to impact that. Am I going to look up NASRO? Am I going to enlist active shooter training? Am I going to tell a friend about the application that they haven't downloaded? And whatever way that is, you have to own some piece of that. And hopefully you've learned, I'm sure you've learned quite a bit from today, but whatever that is that's most interesting to you, tell someone. You now have a responsibility to share this information, and I'm sure there's been something that caught you off guard, might have surprised you. Go deep, dive into that, and learn a little bit. Because the thing about this field of school safety I think is so fascinating is that it is very broad. There is no silver bullet that's going to cure everything, but each of us can have a big way of impacting it through mental health, gun violence prevention, facility hardening of schools, personal safety and security, active shooter response. Look at Run, Hide, Fight. It's a video on what to do. Each of those things are very kind of small, actionable items that you can take and repeat that as much as you can.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I believe that school safety is far too great a responsibility to fall on the shoulders of one individual or one role in the community. And I think that the greater our network, the greater our team, the better educated and prepared that we can be, the safer we're all going to be. It really does take all hands on deck. It really is everybody's business. It's really important that we're working to share information, that we are becoming as educated as we possibly can be, and that we're taking ownership of our own safety. We're not putting that on somebody else. We're not putting our own personal safety, we're not relying upon somebody else at all times to take care of that for us, but that we're stakeholders in it, that it's something that is, it's ours, it belongs to us, and it's our personal power that we should be holding on to.
As Michele said, prevention is key, and police can't do it by themselves. We need the community to step up and really help us out, be eyes and ears out there. If you see something, say something, see something, do something. And the second piece is have a plan. So if something does happen, think ahead of time. Just the simple things of when you walk in a building, know that there's 2 exits. I've talked to administrators here who've been here for years, and said the only way I knew was the front steps I came in and left every day. Didn't know there was a back door. Think about that. Think ahead, because it doesn't have to be an active shooter. It could be a fire. It could be explosion, a gas leak, whatever it may be. Have a plan. Think ahead. And how am I going to respond? What am I going to do?
Well, I can't say it any better than my colleagues have just said it. So I'll leave everyone with a metaphor, and it's your metaphor, Meghna. Move that rock out of the door.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I didn't know the rock was going to be such a star. Michele, I'm going to give you the last word here to wrap things up. But before I sit back down, I want to say thank you again for inviting me, because I learned an incredible amount and was just really pleased to have a chance to be a part of tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you joined us. So this is just a thank you, plain and simple. Thank you for being here, for taking time out on a Thursday night, a work night, actually a party night for many of you as well. I appreciate you being here, being a part of this discussion. We created a community here ourselves this evening, and now, as Kristina said, I hope that you will take the role and responsibility as an ambassador, take what you learned, take the ideas, the inspiration that you received this evening back home and into the communities that you're a part of. Thank you so much.